everybody, and welcome to the Payments Leaders Show, where we have a fireside chat with leaders from the payments industry, and they share how they lead their people in a human-centric way, where doing the right things is really important to them and leading with the right behaviors. Also, where they embrace the opportunities in the payments industry before they actually then look at the challenges. Now, we know one of the biggest problems or biggest challenges in the industry is how do you get high performance from a team, yet allow individuals to express themselves and also reach their potential? Now, one of the stellar people at this is Grace Hayes. Grace is actually led digital and cultural transformations in the payments industry, acting as the voice of the customer. And she focuses on aligning her team to the customer needs and leading with empathy. She is currently leading the European customer delivery across MasterCard. She's not only one of the most curious people I know, she's an exceptional listener, authentic leader, and thoroughly decent human being. So, Grace, thank you for taking your time out of your very, very busy schedule.
No problem. Thank you, Adrian. Looking forward to catching up. So thank you for the invite.
What? No, my pleasure. My pleasure. So I wonder if we should sort of dive straight in and just perhaps you could share with us some of the key choices you've made in your career to date.
Yeah, sure. I've about a 20-year career, so clearly I started when I was very, very young.
Yes, of course, of course.
No, I've always worked in the payment industry, and so it's been a bit of a curious tale because it's not something that I'd originally set out to do from the age of 6 or anything like that. But it's been one of those industries that once I got involved in it, I never looked back. It's incredibly dynamic, very fast paced, and I'm sure all of your listeners will agree if they're in the same industry as me that it's ever changing and evolving. So I've been very fortunate to have multiple careers over that kind of 20-year span, all within that kind of same space. So I guess for me, I've had to make a couple of kind of bold choices to lead me to where I am today and take a little bit of risk along the way. But I guess for me, it really is staying true to the couple of key areas that I hold as my own, I guess, key strengths and just finding the right roles to fit those. That's been really important to me. So regardless of the title or the location, or in some cases even the company, it's been really around what are the things that I really enjoy doing? Because if I have to work a 40-hour week and, you know, get paid for it or whatever, I want to make sure I'm enjoying it as well. And for me, that's really important. So that's taken me across everything from, you know, call center management, project management roles, customer delivery, technology roles, strategy. But ultimately, I've always been doing the type of things that I've liked to do. And to your point earlier, it's been very much around surrounding myself with people, whether it's been really dynamic teams, strong leadership, or, you know, customer journeys, directly out to customers, working with third-party providers, whatever. So that kind of people element has been really important. But also it's around, I guess, problem solving. And it took me quite a while to figure out that this was one of the key things that attracts me to different types of roles. I'm one of those people who, and as you said earlier, I have a curious mind. But in particular, I like going in and trying to solve things that other people find quite complex, really digging deep. I love getting in under the hood and kind of looking at, okay, is that really the real problem that we're trying to solve, or is there a much deeper root there? So any of the roles that I've taken have been very much around that kind of working really well with people, whether internally or externally to my company, and kind of deep diving those complex problems that I'm able to kind of figure out the best solution for.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm sorry, there's so many questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to stay on script. Here we go. This will be a bit of a change. So look, you're responsible, as you've just alluded to there, about complex customer projects at MasterCard. What role does empathy play in delivering to customer expectation and also empathy for the teams you build around you?
Yeah, and I think it plays a huge part, and it's not something that people initially always associate, especially with MasterCard, because we are a technology company. So most of our products and services are directly linked to, we'll say, software or infrastructure or whatever that might be. So it's very difficult to try and link empathy and voice a customer into those kind of situations because it's a technical piece of kit that you just load onto your, you know, hardware or whatever. So it's for me, it's more around, I suppose, really understanding the customer journeys, which a lot of people will review, but really getting into walk in the customer's shoes. And I say that phrase quite a bit, and I do genuinely mean it. I'm a customer of MasterCard as well as an employee. So for me, it's all about maybe how we really design our products and services. How do we really think about what is the end user? How are they going to use this? Are they going to be able to understand it? Are we designing by simplicity and constantly keeping that at the forefront of what we do? But also, you know, a lot of companies talk about creating shareholder value or whatever that might be. For me, it's around, do we really understand the value that this product is actually bringing to our customers? Or do we just assume to know because it's something that works well for, you know, the big banks or whatever? How do we make sure that we are getting the scale, but in the right way? Are we getting it into the hands of those users and really understanding how they're going to use it? Is it not just fit for purpose, but is it adding value to what they bring to their customers, to their users, to their life when they use our products? So for me, empathy is really important when we start thinking about the design, the build, the delivery of all of the technology that we do at MasterCard, but thinking about it through a very different lens.
Wow. Brilliant, brilliant. I think that's just wonderful to hear that. So I've heard and I've observed as well that you're committed to lead with curiosity, and you're always looking for learning opportunities for yourself. And I know how committed you are to the every week, how much commitment you give to that. Can you tell us where that comes from? And also, what's the connection between curiosity and being the voice of the customer? How do you bring those things together?
I guess for me, it's a wee bit different because I was always curious by nature. Even as a child, I'm sure I annoyed my parents by asking way too many questions.
Yeah.
But that's the joy of growing up in a large Irish family.
Yeah,
I
sure.
was in the middle, and if you didn't ask, you didn't get type of
Can
thing.
relate.
So indeed. So for me, curiosity is just a natural trait. It's not something that I've ever had to really develop. But what I have learned is how to use it to my advantage. So yes, I ask lots of questions, but really, what do I do with those answers? And as a child, I wasn't really doing anything. It was just giving me what I needed in the moment. But what I've learned over the years is when I get answers to some of the questions, it actually broadens my knowledge. And by broadening my knowledge, I start to see different opinions, different ways of looking at things. I start to identify my own assumptions that I do make, understand my own unconscious bias that I bring into decisions. So by being curious, straight away, I've started to really expand my exposure. So when we try and link that to voice of customer, it's quite simple. No two customers are the same. Thank God, we're all unique beings in this world, and we look at things very differently. So by being really curious, you can actually expand your level of understanding. And instead of just going, okay, this is 4 different customer personas and we're going to build our product to suit that, you start thinking differently and you start kind of asking the questions that other people may not even come on their radar to ask. And it's not about being difficult. It's not about trying to create multiple different versions of the same thing to suit everyone, but it's around understanding how we build and transform our products to make sure that all of that, I suppose, tech bias that you bring in from maybe 20 years of an industry experience isn't relayed into those products that we're doing. So when I talk about voice of customer, I'm actually seeing myself through a curious lens of questioning or whatever in many different shoes, like I said, many different customer personas, and then I can kind of drive that out to be a much more robust, well-rounded view of how customers use our products in the world today.
Brilliant. So what I'm hearing there is you're very, very aware of the tech bias that a technology company can bring.
Yeah.
This natural curiosity. I love how you've almost made that work for you. I think there's a lot of things that's a great idea about having a natural trait and then actually making it work for us in the world. But it sounds like as well that you're able to join more dots. But I'm also hearing you're not trying to go, this works for everybody. We know we can't fragment and make it work individually for every customer. So actually use it, but also challenging yourself there. It sounds like one of the things you do though is you go, actually, it makes you stop and challenge your own assumptions. Is that fair?
100%. Yeah, everyone has their own maybe unconscious biases in the world. We're all brought up in different background environments, different we'll say environments that will lead us to create different impressions of people. And no matter how good and how much you try and self-reflect and be conscious of it, they will always seep in. And I think particularly when you're working with, really large groups of people, diverse nationalities that we have in MasterCard,
Sure.
it's a lot easier for me to ask those questions because there's
Okay.
lots of different opinions around the table. And as you alluded to, I'm based in our our European tech hub, which is based in Dublin. And even there, we've about 1,200 people, but there's over 40 nationalities based in Dublin.
Yeah.
So it's really diverse, and it's wonderful kind of energy that you bring then when you're seeing all these different types of users, all these different types of potential customers, and you're going into a room and they're coming up with things that are completely off the wall that you've never considered before. But the ability for me, it's great being able to ask the questions, but it's how do you make that into something impactful that you can actually get the value back from it.
Brilliant. So yeah, and obviously I've been to the tech hub, and yeah, the nationalities and the accents and the languages, etc. It's you've got that cognitive diversity. But how do you almost start out here and then, because to start with, you're creating even more data for yourself. Yep.
Yeah.
How do you then hone that in and say, okay, how can I make this? Because MasterCard is about creating impact at scale. Yep.
Absolutely.
Because the network operates globally, and anything we don't want it to just work in one region. We want to work in all 7 regions, etc.
Exactly.
How do you hone that in so you do have that impact at scale?
Honestly, I think one of the best ways is your end goal has to be to create value. Okay. No matter what way you design something, how complex it is, how simple it is to install or to implement, if you're creating value for the end user, they're going to want it. They're going to want to use it. They're going to want to learn how to use it, and it's going to be given something back to them. At the end of the day, lots and lots of products out there in the world, and sometimes you'd wonder, is it a waste of your time or is it a waste of your money or whatever? My goal, regardless, would be no matter what MasterCard product or service you're using, if you feel you're getting value from it, then it's well worth the effort of kind of looking at the larger data set and really being able to kind of simplify it depending on the regional need or the global scale that we're trying to hit.
Wonderful. No, I love your passion for that. And so many people go, actually, it's good enough. And they go in with that it's good enough mindset. Yeah, I can see that's just not you. That's truly not you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I'm just curious on that front, because I never asked you this. Where does that come from? Because again, that's sort of, some would call it a determination, a drive, an ambition, but it doesn't seem like it's an ambition just for you. It's an ambition for others.
I guess for me, mediocrity is not in MasterCard's vocabulary, if I'm being honest. Well, others may disagree, but for me, it's certainly not. And one of the reasons, and this is me speaking personally versus on behalf of the company, but it's enough is never good enough. I think you should always be striving to be better, because if you're not the best in your industry, there's somebody else who's going to be way quicker, way smarter, better value out to the customer behind you. So you always have to be cognizant that you need to be as good as you can possibly be, no matter what your role is, no matter what you're trying to build. And always self-reflect. Moving fast and creating value is one thing, but if you can't do it with, I suppose, the right integrity and the right core values that you want your company to be seen as, your brand is everything, And for me, that's from a personal perspective as well. If I'm asked to do a job, I give it everything. I wouldn't accept it otherwise. If I didn't think I was going to be able for it, or if it simply wasn't the right skill set for me or anything, I'm very quick to kind of know this is my place and this is where I can add value, or this is where I really can't, and you need to find the right person. And I think that's really important as a leader as well, for your teams to see you follow with execution and with a strong kind of desire to excel in whatever task you take on.
You do love a challenge, though, Grace. Be honest.
I do. Genuinely, I do.
No, I was just interested about which projects you turned down. I was really interested. That's a conversation for another day, but I'd love to have a chat with you about those. Look, we share a passion for reducing and ultimately surpassing the gender opportunity gap.
Yes.
Yep. Can you share your lens, please, on this? Because I'm fascinated by this, and I know we've previously talked quite a bit about this. So I'd love to hear your lens on that.
Yeah, so it's something very close to my heart, and thankfully close to an awful lot of my colleagues and peers and others across the industries as well. But certainly in the technology industry, it was always historically known as a bit of a man's game, man's world, maybe a little bit, as so many kind of STEM roles are. But I think in particular, when I joined MasterCard in Dublin, it was much, much smaller than it is today, and it was predominantly men, and there was very few female leaders, certainly not in Ireland, that you could really aspire to. Thank goodness that message has completely transformed over the last 7 years. There's lots to aspire towards now, which is great. But I think there was a very, very conscious effort by our management team, by the company, and where we want to be and how we want to be perceived. How do we get more, I suppose, diversity and decisions being made on behalf of the company as well? So there was real tangible actions taken in order to make sure that we were moving with the times, that we were catching up. But for me, gender equality is very important, coming from Ireland, and I think this was the case in the UK as well. Up until around the 70s, married women weren't allowed to hold certain positions. You had to retire or give up your job completely. And when I say that to my daughter now, who's 12, she's like, no, I don't believe it. That has to be against the law. So for me, it's like, yes, thankfully it is now, but that's only one generation ago. Yeah. So when I look at things that governments are doing to support this, things like more transparency around gender pay, for example, we're seeing an awful lot of the industries, particularly in the UK and Ireland, are now having to publish their gender pay gap reports and so on. And most industries do have gaps. Some are smaller than others, but there's definitely a significant amount of work to be done there. And thankfully, MasterCard is one of those who've published the reports. They identified some gaps, they identified some areas for improvement, particularly with, we'll say, women in more senior executive positions or board positions and so on. And again, that's across the board. It's not something unique to us. But the fact that companies are openly talking about this now, they're being very transparent, they're doing real data reporting around this and kind of sharing their findings, sharing their actions with their employees. To me, that's moved forward. That's really helped us compared to where we were even just a few years ago.
Yeah, it's sort of so I was born in the 70s, and that really sort of hits me about actually just think that was true, and in Ireland probably even more extreme. So I think when something happens in your lifetime, you're like, is that, it doesn't feel like a long time ago, because you're like, no, actually, and to see that change and commitment, and I know MasterCard is very committed to that, and I know Anne Kearns obviously formed the 30% club to get 30% of women on board, and has driven that as well, chairperson on that front. So yeah, so why is that so? Why does that matter? You just mentioned your daughter there as well. Why does that matter so much to you?
I think, I look at my own mother who qualified and then had to become a housewife because she got married and had children in the 70s. I then look at my own career and I'm thinking, wow, I was given a lot of opportunity, a lot of scope to build a career for myself. Then I look at the next generation. Like I said, I have a 12-year-old daughter, but I also have a 16-year-old son. And thankfully, when I have those conversations, they don't believe me. They think that cannot be true. So it's not that I'm trying to convince or change their narrative of the next generation. They just can't believe that in this day and age, we're still having the conversation. This should be something that was solved generations ago, as far as they're concerned. So for me, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of, I suppose, faith in what the next generation will bring. But I do think, certainly governments, strong business leaders, myself and others included, we really need to stand up and be very transparent, very vocal around equality, not just gender equality. Equality in general needs to be an absolute basic right for everyone who's working. So let's see how it evolves. But for me, that's one of my passions, is because I've seen my previous generation, my own, and now my future generation through my daughter's eyes as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love that hopeful message. As you say, I agree. It's not just about gender; it's about much wider equality and opportunity for people. So, Thank you. So, who obviously you mentioned this sort of early on, actually, about some of the opportunities should be given, and who have been the most influential people in you becoming an authentic leader? Because one of the things that strikes me, Grace, about you is you show up as you. Every interaction we've had together, and I'm not sure you believe in hierarchy, because there's probably a door you'll probably knock down to get in there, metaphorically and nicely, obviously. But who's been most influential to sort of enable you to show up as you?
There's been a few people over the years. I suppose, in all fairness, it's probably down to my friends and close family, because they know
Right.
me better
Okay.
than anyone. They definitely give me the encouragement and I suppose really help with my confidence to be me, because it's okay to be Grace. You don't have to show up as anyone else. Um, it's funny when I moved from my previous role. I've only ever worked for two companies, but thankfully they've both been really big, really big, and I've had lots of opportunity to move around to them. But one was a little bit more formal. It was Bank of America, or MBNA, a little bit more formal in terms of dress sense and everything else. And I remember coming into MasterCard at Tech Hub, and I come in wearing completely suited and booted and the whole lot in my first week, and everyone else was wearing hoodies and jeans and the real kind of tech startup scene. And I remember feeling so out of place, so self-conscious, really anxious and nervous in my first week. And then I started thinking, what's the difference? It doesn't really matter. If I like to wear a dress to work and jewelry, that's up to me. If somebody else wants to wear a hoodie and that's what they like to do, that's good for them as well. And I really, I suppose those first few weeks, I was very, very self-conscious, and very quickly I realized that nobody really cares. If you go in, you do a fab job, you work hard and you enjoy what you're doing and you're friendly and happy and a positive persona, nobody really cares, beyond
Yeah.
that point. So for me, I very quickly, to your point, I stopped looking at titles. I stopped looking at, dress sense and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I stay within the boundaries. I do play. But it was really important for me to get to know people as people, regardless what the
Sure.
job
Sure.
title was, what anything else was. And I've maintained that for the last, 6, 7, 8 years in the company. And it has opened doors, because I stopped trying to fit into the mold of Grace is, the commercial director, or Grace is the VP of whatever. And it's more around Grace loves to do this, or Grace is brilliant, to reach out to if you need something like that done over there. And that's how people know me. And I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why I've been able to bring my true self to work. I've never shown up as anything else. But I'm also very conscious that my style doesn't suit everyone. So I try to get to know people as people, and therefore my wider personality shines through.
Wonderful. I think that's the quote for. I've always looked to capture this a stellar line from a conversation. I think just connecting with people as people, I
Yeah.
think is it does go a long way,
Hmm.
and it means you can talk to anybody, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Whether
absolutely.
there's whether that's, I don't know, a waitress, a bus conductor, it doesn't matter. You can
No,
connect with anybody, or CEO, or head of department, or whatever it may be, if you connect with people as people.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. And then I'm just on that. I'm curious then. So how do you sort of tailor that then? Because sometimes you're always positive and you always show up as like this. And I know, I've been accused of it myself. Somebody once said to me, said, "Oh, thank God your wife's not as positive as you, because your house would just full of too much positive energy." And I never even took it as being. I didn't even ever think it could be perceived as negative. But how do you sort of manage that then? So with somebody who might be a bit more introverted, a bit more considered, and frankly, but might be a bit sort of negative about life or etc., but yet you do need to connect with them. How do you do that?
It's just knowing people, getting to know people. There's
Mm.
nobody wakes up in the morning in the worst of bad humors unless there's something triggering it. Most people want to get out of bed and enjoy their day. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
if you
yeah.
can find out, okay, everyone has their bad days, me included, Monday mornings are a bit of a killer. But
Yeah, yeah.
if you go in with the right attitude and you figure out, what is it that's bothering them? It could be something in their personal life, something in their work life, or it could just be that they're having a bit of a low energy day and they need a bit of a pick me up. If you really spend time to get to know people, you can read them quite quickly and you can determine very quickly what's going on. Now, if it's a complete stranger, obviously it's a little bit more difficult. But for me, I am quite high energy. I will admit I can be very fast paced. I do think on my feet and I'm very reactive. I like to kind of move things very
Yeah,
quickly. Not everyone likes that. Some people are
yeah, yeah.
thinkers. Some people like to just relax and, take their time and kind of think things through. It's a different personality style. It's not that mine is any better than theirs or vice versa. So for
Okay,
me, being very conscious of the different
okay.
styles of personality, I do adapt my style. Sometimes not very well. Sometimes I get it wrong, like any other human. But if it comes from the right place with the right intent, people are okay with it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I love that because I think it's it's actually just caring a bit, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
actually just thinking, do you know what? If some, I love the way you've just described that so easily for human behaviors. That somebody doesn't, but it also starts with intention. If
Yeah.
you look at the world and think, actually, I think people only want to come to work and actually they just want to do a bare minimum. But you don't look that you embrace and say, I think everybody wants a good day, and
Hmm.
that's how they start out anyway. Until
Yeah.
somebody's cut them up in traffic or poured coffee over them or whatever it may be. But if
Yeah.
you care enough, then it's your way of connecting. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's different. And I think if you can understand the nuances of what's important to individuals. So for some people it could be the morning rush hour. You know, it takes them an
Yeah,
hour
yeah,
to
yeah.
kind of come out of that in the mornings or whatever. And in some cases, you know, especially if they're introvert, they just like to be left alone. So for me, it is don't go near them until 10 a.m. and then bring them a coffee or something. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
getting to know your people, getting to know those around you, your friends, your colleagues, at the end of the day, it's everyone's life is a wee bit easier if we all get along, you know?
Wonderful, wonderful. Now there is a saying um that everybody needs a damn good listening to. And I think in this world, in a very busy world, in a very whatever, I've yet to meet anybody who, when you make it safe for them, doesn't want to talk. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
As in
Yeah,
about themselves.
yeah,
Because a safe place where they can just be themselves and just tell stuff and
yeah.
just get it out.
Mm.
So brilliant, brilliant. Um, I've learned so much here about how you show up now. It's brilliant. So if we look back earlier on in your life, whether you were 21 or perhaps you want to look back then
Mm.
and just say, what do you know now that you wish you knew then that would be really helpful to your 21-year-old self?
Oh my goodness, do not take myself so seriously. Oh.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I was a very serious teenager. And early in my career, I was always planning like for my pension and my retirement back when I was like 19. And I think about it now, I'm like, oh my goodness, why didn't you just, let your hair down and, go out partying
Okay.
on a Sunday night instead of, whatever. So there is that element of it. But also it's around, I suppose, yeah, definitely confidence. I think that grows with age. I think everyone becomes a little bit more comfortable in their own skin as they
Yeah,
experience more to life. Um, but for me, I think one of the things that held true right from a young age was being able to dream. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit corny, but I love dreaming big. I think about, okay, in 5 years, what could I, and some people say, oh, I'd win the lotto or whatever. Whereas I'd be like, no, I really want to do X, Y, and Z, and
okay.
it may be completely off the wall. It may to anyone else the kind of laugh or joke and go, why would you do that? Or why would you even want to? But for me, it's always been one of those things. I like the big dreams, lots of little steps to try and get there in the background, and I may have to maneuver a few times and I may not even hit that. But if I don't have that kind of big, as the Americans would say, like the big bodacious goals or whatever,
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
me
yeah, yeah.
that's what keeps me going. Some of them are shorter term than others, and some of them are very different, like doing a skydive or going swimming with great white sharks or whatever. It doesn't have to always be linked with work, but it has to be something that constantly pushes me outside of my comfort zone. And for me,
Okay.
that's the one thing that I would say very early, if I was to look back in my 20s, is keep dreaming really big, but just whatever you're thinking now, almost double it. Because as I've matured over life and over the last 20 years, I've achieved an awful lot of those dreams simply by kind of pushing myself that wee bit further every year.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. I love that. I love that.
Mm,
So could we just dig into that a little bit? So there's so much you said there. So one from an early age, you had that don't take yourself so seriously, but
yeah,
actually it sounds like by doing so, you realize you could achieve things. But that dreaming big, yeah.
yeah,
So and you also said something amazing there. You just actually said that just do that, but then sort of double it. Tell us
yeah.
more about that. That's amazing.
So I think, a lot of people might say, well, I'd like to retire early at 55, for example. I'm like, well, why wait till you're 55? Grace, can you do it at 45? Can you do it at, and it's always kind of going, okay, if everyone else thinks that they might be able to do that, just push yourself to do it that bit more. So it could be, for example, I went back to college in my 30s once my kids started school, went back, and I've since then I've done I don't know how many courses. I'm like a never
Yeah,
never
yeah, the
ending
list. Yeah,
learner at this stage.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But they've not followed a very simple path. So I've done everything from like psychology to sales to finance to whatever. So it's not following a direct route that other people's would choose. For me, it's
Okay.
always been around what's really complicated, what do you not know, and what might you need to know in the future to get you to that big dream. And that's kind of how I've done it. So for some people looking at them, I think, oh, that's a bit of organized chaos going on there with her learning journey. But for me, it's not, because it depends on where my gap was, where my skills
Yes.
need
Yeah.
to go, and what I intend to do with that learning in the future. It may not be obvious to those around me at the moment, but that's generally because I'm trying to play out maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead.
Brilliant. So does that mean then you're looking those 2 or 3 steps ahead and almost taking a step back and saying, actually, this is a strength, this is a strength, that's pretty strong, but there's some obvious weaknesses there. And
Yeah.
actually, directionally, I'm just going to follow my intuition I reckon that direction is going to work for me. That's going to play
Yeah.
out well.
Yeah, but linking that to something you enjoy and something you're interested in genuinely doesn't, it's not hard work then. Do you know, when I
Yeah.
started, when I done psychology, I specialized in organization behavior because I was working with lots of mergers and acquisitions in Mastercard at
Sure,
the
sure.
time. So when you link the two together, you're kind of going, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But then in 5 or 10 years' time, I might need that skill of being able to
Yeah.
adapt, you know, behavioral science and so on to another field, to
Yeah.
another hobby, even, you know?
Just a quick interlude here. I use something that I learned 12 years ago. Yep. And yeah, only 2 weeks ago. And somebody said to me, "Oh my God, God, that's been latent for 12 years." But I didn't look at it like that. I was like, if I'd not learned it 12 years ago, I
Yeah.
couldn't have used it last week. So it wasn't as if it's been wasted for 12 years. Now, obviously, I then to myself, could I use it a bit more because it really
Yeah,
worked well? But actually, it's trust. It sounds like it's trusting your instincts and backing your confidence to, because it sounds to me like you've got almost a flywheel here of you've done this, you've backed yourself and it's worked, and it's worked not perfectly, but
yeah,
it's worked directionally, and now you've got momentum and that flywheel
exactly.
is just going.
Exactly. And with that, your confidence grows. And when you've got better confidence, you're kind of trust your fate a little bit more and you set the goals that little bit higher. And yeah, and look, it's never, there's always going to be pitfalls. There's always going to be blockers in your way or whatever. But the resilience that you build up from having that over the years means that, yeah, everyone fails. Everyone falls down at some stage or another. You wouldn't be taking a big enough chance on yourself if you didn't. But your ability to bounce back really quickly and how you react to that's what really will aid your trajectory over time.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing. I love our conversations because I didn't know where this was going to go. And the good thing, we've stayed on pretty swift today. We've been pretty good for
Not
us,
bad.
very good, not bad at all. So look, this is where I normally try and pull out about 3 or 4 really key themes, etc. But I've got so many down here. I wonder if I can just sort of just pull some of them together. Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think that the first common theme for me here is about doing what you like, doing what you enjoy, and actually it doesn't then feel like work. And I can almost see the Venn diagram here for you. For you, it has to be around people,
Hmm.
problem solving, and then a deep dive, really getting under. So if something is going to have those 3 parts, there's a lovely little sweet spot in the middle. That's probably going to get you really sort of souped up to do a great job, and
Exactly.
it's not going
Yeah.
to feel like work for you either.
No,
Um,
no.
Secondly, empathy there, and just being really conscious of that, particularly as a tech organization, and just saying, actually, look, are we showing where's our biases here, and actually challenging ourselves on our own assumptions. But I love the fact that if you keep the eye on the prize, which is if we're adding value throughout the chain here, then it's probably a pretty good direction to take in rather
Yeah.
than pushing some tech on people.
Hmm.
But then individually, the need to regularly self-reflect and say, actually, okay, what job did we do? How could I have done that better, without actually moving, with actually sort of giving yourself too hard a time? And actually how important it is for people to see not just female role models, but actually a diverse group of, because if you can see it, you can believe it.
Yeah.
And also fascinating to see the big effort that everybody's made in our lifetime, from government to big organizations. And you
Hmm.
work for one that's obviously producing the data and also trying to do something about it as well. And that's evidence, particularly there in Ireland.
Hmm.
And I think then it's almost, I say, the other one for me is like it's almost an insatiable level of curiosity. But what's fascinating is how you've harnessed that and actually made that work for you, because
Hmm.
you could be curious and you could just go off, whereas that allows you to join various dots. I think it's interesting as well about Grace showing up as Grace. family, strong friends, relationship, it's okay to show up as Grace, and actually you continue to do that and dress and show up and be you as you want to. But also, I think the other piece then, I think for me was just that confidence to back yourself, to say, actually, just because that's the norm of what people will do, whatever retirement, that age, etc. It seems to me like you come alive when you say, actually, do you know, I could do that just a little bit differently and in a Grace sort of way. So I think the sort of common theme for me is do what you're passionate about, but also then dream big, but marry those two things together.
Mm-hmm.
Is
That's it. That's it in a nutshell, Adrian. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Have you got anything else you'd want to add to today's conversation?
No, I think it was really good. I think, you know, for anyone who's interested in any of the topics that we talked about as well, you know, the fundamental message to your point is, if you believe in yourself and you kind of set those really good targets for yourself and you put in a bit of hard work, it might not always work the way you want, but there is a path there set out for you. So it may feel like you're taking a bit of a fork in the road every now and again, or having to take a back step. But what I've learned, if anything, over the last 20 years is build yourself up to a point where you have the ability to then take those side steps, those back steps, those steps forward, with the same level of confidence, regardless of the journey. And you will always end out on top. So thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful place to end there, which is to build your self-belief and just know that it'll probably work out well in the end.
Yeah.
Thank you, Grace. I really appreciate
No problem.
your time and your insights and your passion and your energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.